All right, it's a brand new week. I hope you're feeling brand new yourself as we kickstart the third week of the month of March. And we are grateful to the Almighty God for helping us brave through the many storms of life and once again wake up this morning. It is indeed by His grace, but not by kuhlakanipha kwethu. We want to delve into interesting topics this morning on the show. We want to focus on Eswatini's youth economy, the partnerships, the policies, as well as the push for real change. Now, for years, young entrepreneurs in Eswatini have faced the same hurdles: funding shortfalls, limited market, and policies that often look better on paper than they do in practice. But is that finally changing? Now, the Youth Chamber of Commerce and Industries has inked a deal with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, aiming to connect young business owners with real opportunities in urban development and beyond. Meanwhile, across the country, key economic stakeholders from Business Eswatini to APA, SEDCO, and the Federation of Eswatini Business Community are ramping up engagement on the Citizens Economic Empowerment Act, with youth participation now a major talking point. There will be convening today at the United Nations building this morning to, look for more developments with regards to, how we really have practical action with this act, one that reaps sustainable outcomes. So is this the moment that young entrepreneurs have been waiting for, or are we looking at another round of promises without delivery? We're going to break it all down on the show, what is being offered, who's barking it, and most importantly, whether Eswatini's youth will finally get their fair share of the economic pie. Sakile Nsibanda is the president of the Youth Chamber of Commerce Industries. She will be giving us insights with some of those rather developments. But also, it is a Monday. We want to look at this thrilling weekend of football that we just witnessed. There was a lot of drama, a lot of upsets, and history in the making. Of course, Newcastle United have done it, clinching their first domestic trophy in 70 years. They did this with a hard-fought 2-1 win over Liverpool in the Carabao Cup final. Over in the Premier League, Arsenal obviously edged Chelsea in what was a lack of a victory in a tense London derby, while Manchester United swept past Leicester with a commanding 3-0 victory. Yes, that is true. United won 3-0 against Leicester. I know even United fans who may have not been abreast with the news do not believe it, but yes, that is the reality this morning, and that is the reality in England. And in Spain, FC Barcelona producing a stunning comeback, turning a 2-0 deficit into a 4-2 win over Atletico Madrid to keep pace at the top of La Liga. They have been really impressive this season, and if you had an ounce of doubt that they could make a comeback against Atletico while you were watching that football, then perhaps you have not really been following Spanish football as you should this season. Barcelona winning per usual. Plenty to unpack on the show this morning, and we will be breaking it all down with sports journalist Linda later on the show. Of course, I did, speak on the fact that we will have that youth trajectory sort of conversation with a youth member, part of the Youth Chamber Commerce Industries president. She's part of the youth demographic herself, and so it looks to be an engaging conversation. We are not going to have our traffic update. A few issues we're still sorting out in terms of, the lines that we connect in with our traffic department from the Royal Eswatini Police Service. But we do have our local news. We do have weather focused. As we also do have our local news in English. But to kickstart the show, let's look at the leading news across major leading newspapers. All right, let's start with the Eswatini Observer. These are the leading stories. Top story there, health sector at risk of capture. Prime Minister reveals that health crisis is being orchestrated by certain forces. Another story in Kwalini Zone 4 prays against gangsterism and gender-based violence. Kwalini Zone 4 pastors and community members gather in prayer to end these endemic situations in gangsterism and gender-based violence as well as murder. This was during their annual opening prayer, which was also attended by Mbabane West MP Jane Mkonda Simelane and members of the Royal Eswatini Police Service at Ngwalini Health and Social Center yesterday. On another one, alleged serial rapist has been arrested and a man has been electrocuted while fixing tractor. That's it on the front page. Let's go on the back end and browse through the sports headlines. Making the big story there, 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers. Junior blow for Sihlangu, player to miss both Cameroon and Mauritius games due to injury. Sihlangu Semnigati, of course, suffering another major setback ahead of their crucial 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifier matches against Cameroon and Mauritius. Mbabane Giants eye Prince of Wales for home matches. The Premier League of PLE is considering allowing Mbabane Giants, Highlanders and Swallows to host some of their matches at the Prince of Wales ground. Of course, this is in a bid to bring the games closer to the two teams' supporters. This was revealed by PLE Chief Executive Officer Petros Gungmusa Vilagati. Simanga Simpiwe Conquer Open Water Challenge. This was in a thrilling display of talent and determination. Top swimmer Simanga Dlamini, Simpiwe Dlamini, emerging victorious in their respective age groups during the Open Water Challenge yesterday. Newcastle beat Liverpool to win Carabao Cup and trophy wait. The Newcastle ended their 70-year wait for a major domestic trophy as they beat holders Liverpool 2-1 at Wembley to win the Carabao final. Yeah, that's it. Let's move on to the Eswatini Daily News. These are the top stories. A big story, King applauds World Vision for transforming Bolonjeni through water project. Armed robbers steal 200,000 in Malangeni at our bike investments. And business ideas to be protected, musicians to get royalties in 2025. The back end of this publication, junior blow for Sihlangu, lavishly talented Real Leopard midfielder Dynamo Junior Makakula withdraws from national team Sihlangu to face Cameroon's indomitable Lions and Mauritius on Friday, as well as on Wednesday in the 2026 World Cup qualifiers due to an injury. It's a sad story. Another one, Christian Twala joins Sihlangu and Sori Kaizer Chiefs slump to loss at Richards Bay. These are our top stories this morning from our major newspapers. We will go for a net break. We'll come back with our news in our local language.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Maswata mahle solo nibukela Kusile Breakfast Show uhlelo lwecala liviki lesithathu kule nyanga lesetulu. Nathi ke tindzaba teswati balimi labangetulu kwe-30 lapha vela etfundzeni totini etakuleli sebatfole kufundziswa kabanti ngekulima ummbila kanye ke nekulima kulinywa kwamabhontshisi lokutaka kwenta kutsi isivuno sibe ngulesihle. Labalimi bafundziswa inkampani yahulumende letsenga iphindze itsengise ummbila i-National Maize Corporation.
Awuqali kulungiselela kuyolima nasetawuna timvula. Nawucedza nje kuvuna ngakusasa ulungiselela kuyawuhlanyela. So let's start now silungisa indzaba yemali, silungisa indzaba yako konke lokudzingeka. NMC ngubekisele nyalo ngekubuka ukuthi ama-implements bayashoda. Amaplanta nje simthengile 5. Kulo mnyaka lo April sitamthenga 9. Sithe nasile mali njengoba ngisho ukuthi sithe le mali kodwa sitawubona sincite lapha nalapha sikhona ukuthola lamaplantela latanenda ukuthi ningabe solo nijika. But isilenza basale sisebenza smart phela. Asithi mas announcele ukuthi sitawuphuma sing-NMC siyesithathaweni siyokhempa mhla kabani. Asingakhathi ukuthi esithathaweni kunalo ongabhadali sofuna simjikele yedwa ngalelinye ilanga. Kanti phela sithi sizama kuba efficient nathi ukuthi nasi sithi siphumile netigulumba leting10 siyo attacka sithathaweni. Simshaya ngeliviki sicedzile ngaye siplantele sihambile. Siyasuka lapho siya kwenye indzawo lesi-identifyile ukuthi ine-potential ekondla lelive nakhona senza the same thing. The issue ukuthi tigulumba nema-implements akusi enough, we can address it by that strategy. We tried it this season. Maswati angasibambisi. Sifike nelitulu ke nalo langasibambisi. Climate ke kude lesingayenda kiko, but we are always trying. But what we labeled outside there is like a monster. NMC longafuni kubambise Maswati wara this and that. We asikhulumeki kahle, but we are trying our best with the limited resources.
Fete kuvikela sewuvakashela elidolobha lasebuhleni kaHoho emkhankasweni ke wekulungiselela lusuku lwempi pheceleti Army Day campaign. Kulolu vakasho umbutho unikelele sive sakulendzawo ngelisito lwekudla kanye nalelo lwetempilo ikakhulukati kubogogo nabomkhulu.
Major General Thembinkosi Mngometulu lebekadze amelele umkhuteli wempi kulomcimbi utsi bangumbutho batimisele kusisita sive lapho sidzinge khona lusito ngato tonke tindlela njengoba umsebenzi wabo kuvikela sona sive.
Siyimpi sitoti veta ezivele ekutseleni sikhona siyimpi sikhonela nini emalangeni sikhona siyimpi sitosita nini kulo lonke lihlobo ningasesabi lapho kunenkinga khona sonzela phela emasotsheni usho ukuthi oh ungathi sinenkinga la.
Senior Regional Officer wesifundza sakaHoho Hlangabeza Shabangu wendlulisa emave kubonga kuwo umbutho ngekwandzisa lwati kuso sive ngawo umsebenzi wemasotsha.
Siye sithi lasitenda kaHoho lasicabanga lisotsha sithi ngakhahlelwa mina. Siyabonga ukuthi namuhla niqhamuka nini phela smile niveta ukuthi nibantu babethu ningcenye yesive sakithi.
Umphathi welidolobha lasebuhleni Gordon Mbuli uphathise tona tisebenti talombutho emave kubonga kumkhuteli wempi ngekukhetsa kuvakashela lona lidolobha lasebuhleni.
Kakhulu kumphathi wamasotsha lokuthi emasotsha sabonakala ukuthi asonzela kubantu. Into lebaluleke kakhulu singathi khanzi wathi emasotsha adithathe.
Ngekujabula lokukhulu sive naso sibeze sendlulisa emagama ekutibongela kuwo umbutho ngelusito lesiniketwe lona.
Ngiyabonga etikwengwenyama nemajayi ngwenyama onke lasiphe kudla nebalodungandaba sembelebeleni.
Lebeti batosipha kulashwa edibhedlela noma nje sikhanza kugcwele kodwa nje simakade sibonga ukuthi bakhonile kudala phepheni batosilapha
sikudalwa ngoba nawo umbutho ukutholela ukudla ngaphansi kwesidlala.
Abantu abaningi abantu abadala bakhona ukuqueisha edibhedlela namhlanje kushaya umoya edibhedlela ngoba bakhonile kusitakala ngala edibhedlela ukhanza ukuthi bonesi sibabajwayele kodwa babona busoro busha bathinta dandla leti fresh letingakake dibathinze batawulala baphilile namuhla. Siyabonga kakhulu iyo idefu nekudla bakhonile ukuthi batawuhamba kube nalokhu bakuthola kule bakudla.
Lolu vakasho lwalombutho kule ndzawo lingulenye yemalungiselelo elusuku lolukhulu lwempi pheceleti i-Army Day lolutogujwa mhla tinge-28 enyangeni lesetulu lakhona sonke sive simenyiwe ukuthi siwungenele lo mcimbi lotobe usenhloko hhovisi eNokwane. Lobikela umsakazo wetitfombe eSwatini TV uThabiso Maphanga ebuhleni.
Emetameni yokuqinisekisa ukuthi sive sitfola kuphatheka kahle emaphoyiseni. Emaphoyisa lange-48 laqhamuka eteshini temaphoyisa letahlukene kuleli sekafundziswa kabanti ngalolu hlangothi lwatiwa nge-Customer Care Service Course. Akhuluma ngesikhathi yavala lo mhlangano sikolo umphathi wamaphoyisa kuleli Vusman noma Masango libekakadzamele lwelisekela lakhe Christopher Lukhela utsite emaphoyisa kumele ahlale njalo angilasebenta ngebucotfo ngalokubhekekile kubo.
Bantu beta baletha tikhalo letinye tato asito tethu temaphoyisa ukuthi mhlawumbe udinga mhlawumbe intervention noma ke assistant emaphoyisa. But wena njengeliphoyisa lelatiko so uyamqondzisa lo muntu babe noma make nayo indlela hamba lapha ungathola khona lusito. So uyahamba kumuntu omdzala uyathola lusito umkhulumise kahle umphathe kahle uliphoyisa uyamnikeza indlela yokusebenza. Chubekani phela emaphoyisa libeke emaphoyisa leliswatiko lalafundisekile leliswatiko lafundisekile ukuthi kufanele sasebenzisane njani nesive avule indlebe avule emehlo abesanciphisa kakhulu la akhuluma nangabe kufanele uyathi nefanele ukukhuluma uyiphoyisa ukuthi lena ingaphuma emlonyeni weliphoyisa bese ke seneyaphuma phela la TikTok nesha khombisa sokukhulumile ngeTikTok ayibonakali inhle in particular kini libomake baphi bomedeni ayibonakali inhle TikTok. So wona phoyisa nje lapha so wenda into lesingakayivavi ngale uniform kungcono ngabe ufuna kufaka mhlambe into ku TikTok kungcono manje uyikhumule.
We promise that we will impact the knowledge that we have received here to our colleagues at our different formations. Sitawusebenzisa ngetimisela sifake ligonso sithinkwe ekulweni nebucala kanye netingoti temgwaqo.
Umsebenzi wokwakhiwa kwelibloho nekulungiswa kwemigwaqo kaMjuda sewuku-75% kuthi uphele. Kanti ngeke kusho kwanjinye lomkhulu wetemgwaqo etiko lemisebenzi lemikhulu nekutfutsa Menzimbingo lo msebenzi sawuhlelelwe ukuthi uphele kule nyanga yeNdlovulenkhulu.
Libloho lakaMjuda T-junction enhlangano ngilesinye setakhiwo letalinyatwa imvula liyehla ngemandla nakucala umnyaka. Njinela lomkhulu wetemgwaqo etiko lemisebenzi lemikhulu nekutfutsa Menzimbingo uchaza ngekuthi lo msebenzi sewuhambe kanganani.
Nyalo sisesigabeni ke sokuthi sesingabika ukuthi secishe simkhavile 75% of the work. Sibukile lapha ukuthi kutawuthi kuphela lenyanga ya March sidabe sicedzile netimoto cishe titabe setihambe etule emgwaqweni losuka khona la kaMjuda uyeka lavumisa. I-activity njengoba ubona emva kwami nje leseyisele emdluliko ukuthi sakhe i-booster slab letawubamba shothi lama culverts lawa lesesiwaplaceile ema earthworks sekaqalile nawo la khona siya backfiller imaterial letawenda ukuthi senyusa lomgwaqo usufixe ezingeni la khona ngabe sekudala abantu asifakela litiyela.
Mbingo uphinzwe waveta ukuthi leminye imisebenzi letawusukunyiswa litiko lemisebenzi lemikhulu nekutfutsa kusuka ngenyanga yenhlaba lefake ikhatsi kufaka litiyela emgaqweni emasayisini nasemahlalini. Thando kuhle Mdluli Entsebenti yeSwatini TV Inhlangano.
Ilunga lenkundla yaseMbabane West umhlonishwa James Melano uthi live lakangwane libusekile ngekuba nebaholi lababika yonke imisebenzi yelive kulomdzala wetinsuku.
Sitothandaza njengoba sonke silandzela etinyathelweni tebaholi betfu labangibona ukuthi nakuqala umnyaka babite sonke sive kutothandazwa nasemiphakathi siyabona boba betikhulu babita imithandazo nathi siyizoni umthandazo ukhona sitawuchubeka ke siye nasenkundleni siyoba nemthandazo enkundleni la sibita bonke abantu bemazoni ethu sihlangana enkundleni khona. Lo mthandazo lona kungumthandazo la sibeka khona sibeka inkundla yethu sibeka emazoni ethu siwaletha kuNkulunkulu siletha bonke abantu lesinabo kuNkulunkulu. Kwekucala sitawuthandazela emakhosi langona ngoba lisho njalo iBhayibheli lithi asithandazeleni emakhosi nabo bonke lebasemagonyeni. Sibuye sithandazele lesive lesihleli naso sihlaselwe buphuya uma singakuhlasela ngemthandazo uNkulunkulu nathi utasivetela lela loya mthombo la uvetela Hagayi nakakhala azula nemntwana esigangeni. Nathi noma kubonakala kude lesingakwenda kodwa umthombo uNkulunkulu angazivetela uma sitawuhlala emthandazweni. Kutholakale lendzawo yethu nayo seyiba nawo umthombo wekuphilisa sive sethu salenkundla.
Imibiko lephumile kuleli viki leliphelile ihlamutisa umtimba ngendzaba yokuhlukubeteka kwabantwana nebantu besifazane. Bangu 2,413 bantu labahlukubetekile ngeminyaka wa 2024. Lokho-ke kuvetwa inhlangano yengungu yemathemba iswaga. Tinzatheli talo msakato tukhulumisene nesive kuva ukuthi ngabe lokwanza kwaleti gameko kubangwa yini nokuthi-ke kungagwemeka kanjani kuhlukubeteka nekuhlukubetana.
Ngingafisa ukuthi nale masonveni babe nalo liklasi bawameme nemaphoyisa kufundwe nje ngaleti ndlela tekuhlukubetana noma sayibona kuyanza la masonveni etinkinga leti kaso
uze umuntu abe kahle kula kwendako naye asisabe la kwendako njengalokugagadlela nje gagadlela abamfana gagadlela abadzala asisathi usikuphuma kubi kopha nasihlanganyelela emiphakathini bataseluleka nje
bantu ababele kuJesu kude lokungancoba lembi lena ngaphandle ukuthi bantu babele kuJesu ngingabekisa ngekushaya umfati awufike esigabeni sekushaya sizathu kuJesu uyalimitheka.
Ngicabanga ukuthi sonile uNkulunkulu uyasijezisa so uthi angilaka lolubi uNkulunkulu mina sithobe sicela inzethelelo uNkulunkulu, that's all.
Le unplanned pregnancy ngiyo nje icala lesimoshako make nje longangenelani nemuntu umithile etshwaleni ini uyayibona lento leyo akangenelani nalabantwana labo uyayibona.
Ngicabanga ukuthi isombululo sawo ukuthi mangabe uva ukuthi-ke uyahlukumeteka in any way uvele usukume ngaleso sikhathi ungamele ukuthi kuze kube wesi.
Nasingazama nje ukuthi sibe vigilant sonke sibe nekunaka unake nje na ubona umfana ngoba umfana awugcini ngekokuthi abonakale njengalaba sekakhishwe endlini sebonzile uyambona ngishahamba nalenhloko nje ukuthi lo mfana lona ngathi akadli kahle lanzelela
ushacekile yathi side lemagama ekhuluma sinisuke sethukile nje sibomake.
Takhamuti tase zone 6 ngaphansi kwenkhundla yaseMbabane West tikhala leti smartphones ingenivutfuko lesolo ihamba kancane kule yandzawo.
Kutsite ngelisontfo sive sase zone 6 kumahalala eMbabane sahlangana nelibandla lelibuke intuthuko kulommango kukhulumisa tindzaba letifaka ekhatsi intuthuko lebhekekile nekuthi kungabanjiswana kanjani kude ifezeke. Sihlalo welibandla lentuthuko Bhekizwane uthi ngekusebenisana namasipala lendzawo kunyenti letakuzuza kude intuthuko.
Nanyalo nje sibe nawo ama-resolution kwaba khona ukuthi batawubuya bakamasipala bato-addressa some of the things labakhala ngato lesive. So nguye masipala loyaye asiniketile go ahead ukuthi ngilokulata kulungisa emangweni wethu.
Setiphawula kulomhlangano takhamuti tase zone 6 tibeke kanjena.
Ngajabule ukuthi nakusikwa letitandi ngithole indzawo yokusebentela angathi ngoba ibandla liyakucabanga ukuthi ngiyaphuzinga lo ngoba libona ukuthi ngikade nje ngisebentele ekhaya ngendzawo kodwa khansela ngabe mhlawumbe usivele yini ngale ngendazi kamasipala ukuthi letitandi bangatawuba nayo imali yokuthi basisikele ngoba basete nemali sive ukuthi uhulumende ude nemali latawuniketa yona masipala kusho ukuthi makufuba ethu ukuthi singathola letitandi ngenteka kuphela omunye 5 years.
Uzothi alivakali maphoyisa emango akhuluma nani nitawuthi nanita nani lithi nite nento leqinile babedlamile nalicala lenkubeka lo uyatihlola yini nahlala ukatitakho la kumahwanala
thina la kumahwanala kahle kahle azange sesifundziswe ngemali sitawukhala ngayo asiwadela abavethi ukuthi yini but MPs ukhuluma ukuthi kubhadalwa emarket.
Buchopho wakulendzawo Sabelo Phiri ucinisekise ngetinhlelo tentuthuko letitawusukunyiswa inkundla usombulula tikhalo talesive.
Bavetile ke bakazone 6 ukuthi batawucela bona ukuthi bakhelwe i-primary school letawufida kiso sona lesikolo lesimekiso sase same, and then ke lokunye lokukhona isakhiwo setimakethe lesicelwe ke sona nabo naso ngilesive sive sala sikhathatheke kakhulu ukuthi solokude imakethe lenkulu nje le bebangakhona ukuthi basebentele kiyo bomake nje bagcwele letitalati lamigacweni. So ke kungenile kule strategic plan sitawusebenzisa le community development fund yethu.
Phiri uthi sive asikukhuthalele kubumbana simikise ticelo tekusekelwa emisebentini leyahlukene njengoba sikhwama sekuthuthukisa lo mmango we-Community Development Fund ina 5 million emalangeni kanti kusebhekeke na 3 million emalangeni lochamuka esikhwameni sekuthuthukisa tinkhundla lotawundlondlobalisa tebhizinisi kulendzawo. Etindzabeni kubika Nothi Lesithole, inambongo Dube, Sigmahola la Mbabane.
Kubambisana emkhathini kwembutfo wembubene sive kanye nemaphoyisa eMmango kwenta umehluko wokunciphisa bucala endzaweni yakamsunduza. Umphathi wesiteshi semaphoyisa eMbabane Sabelo Dlamini uthi bucala lobebuhlupha kakhulu kamsunduza kucekezwa kwetindlu kanye nekwemukwa kwebantfu yimbahla.
Siveza kamsunduza sifundziswe kabanti ngetindlela tekuphepha kanye netekugwema bucala lobufaka ekhatsi kubona bantfwana nase bangenele umkhuba we-gangsterism. Umphathi wesiteshi semaphoyisa eMbabane Sabelo Dlamini uthi ke le ndzawo yakamsunduza beyinebucala lobenta kutsi sive sihlale sesaba.
Kucekezwe robbery, you name it. Kodwa ke sanela ukuthi sihlangane nalesive sibatshele ukuthi kude lokwenca kuhlangana asihlangane nembala lokwehlisa lobucala kusithi sisodwana ngile partnership lekhona ngile trust lekhona emkhatsini wethu sisive nemaphoyisa akulenzawo. Lokho ke kusende ukuthi letigebengu tithanze setingenamhlaba tase tiyakhwesha.
Iphoyisa leMmango lakamsunduza Hongo Maphalala lithi banetinkinga letenta ukuthi amaphoyisa eMmango angakhoni kusebenta ngalokuphelele.
Sihlishwa ngilabatali. Labatali abafuni kubambisana nathi. Nalabo mastandi bathatha imali bangathi ukuthi labantu basebenzaphi. Angathi lo muntu uhleli simini yonke ebusuku uyavuka kamathi usebenza kuphi. Lokho kuyasilimata futhi kakhulu kulandzela ukuthi ufuna bathi i-idea lo muntu ukuthi uqhamukapi usebenzaphi la. Lokho kusilimata kakhulu ngoba sisakhona ukubambisana kahle nalommango wethu.
Lilunga lephalamende lenkundla yaseMbabane East umhlonishwa Welcome Dlamini lithi ke sive sakamsunduza sibe sesifaka imivo mayelana nemithetho lesakhankanywa.
Sivile ukuthi umthetho lesiwa yi-crime prevention bill. Kodwa address indzaba temaphoyisa eMmango ukuthi wona anakekela kanjani futhi asebenza kanjani emaphoyisa ahulumende. Uma kwaze kwaphasa lokho nalobucala laMmango lisakhona kulwa nayo. So bakhala ngisuke manje asibene ashaya umthetho ephalamende lothi umfazi watala umntwana aphoceleleke ukuthi amondle angabe soniketa lomunye umuntu. Bengibonile na DPM athi kuhamba vele kungenwa ngemuti ukuthi lendvo le baphi labatali batholakala abatali balabantwana kungakuthi nje gogo usene abantwana batali bayaphila but abayithathe responsibility.
Emavikini lambalwa lengcile kulendzawo yakamsunduza kuhambe umphefumulo ngetinsolo tebucala lobuhambisana ne-gangsterism. Etindzabeni kubika Sonto Mlangeni naseThabile Mamba sikamsunduza eMbabane.
Sive sakumakholokolo eMbabane sikhala ngekunganakeki kahle kwaso etindzabeni tetikhwama tentfutfuko. Lokhu kuvele emhlanganweni wabo nelibandla lelibuka intfutfuko pheceleti Local Community Committee lovunyelwa ngumasipala welidolobha laseMbabane.
Lesive sihlangene nelibandla lelibuke kutfutfuka i-Local Community Committee leyite kutotfula kusebenta kwayo kwetinyanga letintsatfu letendlulile. Khansela Vusi Tembe uthi lesive sakumakholokolo sineshisekelo yekwati kabanti ngetikhwama tentfutfuko letikhona eveni.
Lokutholakele lakho ukuthi kunema projects labake bawasukumisa phambilini but ukhanza ukuthi agcina kasafiki ekugcineni. Njengamanje kube nesikhalo ukuthi abasafune uku-attenda le mihlangano ngekuthi vele babona ngathi abasizakali babona vele they are left out but kube seMmango uba naso si-resolution noma sisombululo ukuthi cha asebabuye babuye bakhulunyiswe kuvakale ukuthi ingabe isala kuphi, ingabe ngalungise kanjani going forward.
Lesive sibese sithola lithuba lekuveta imivo yaso.
Ngoba phela babeqopho thina sibuke wena. Umuntu makakushayela wena awulibambi isidingo lakho. Asisakwati ukuthi sowubhaca kunani netinkinga yiniqopho. Ngoba phela makunetinkinga buye sihlale phasi ikhulume. Kuyasikhuba thina kuyasilimala.
Babeqopho siyacela Nkosi yami. Asongibite lo mhlangano bancengela abantu bacela. Batophefumula bakhona lokukhuluma lengomluka lengekhathi ephithweni tabo. Basho nalokuthi sebadzinga ukuthi kwentu wenu nyalo badzinga ini ukuthi ubentele ini.
Buchopho wakumakholokholo Mhlonipheni Mazibuko ubese uveta tinyathelo letawutsatfwa ngulenkhundla.
Ngicabanga ukuthi tawufuna silungiselela lokuthi singayicelani nje yonke le yala kumakholokholo. But tonke letigodi hayi yakumakholokholo kuphela. Tonke letigodi sathatha vele iplanet besho nje ukuthi siyafuna sambe ukusuka kusala. Senyuke kancane sinasibita balapho sibe nabo lalaba balamafana. So that kutoba lula lo sithi sikhuluma sibe sisho ukuthi kuna naba abathuthukile labakhuluma nge-RDF, kuna naba labakhuluma ngemali yakayuti, kuna naba labakhuluma ngemali yemashayeni. Nithini nina nimephi nifise kwenta ini? I think kumqoka lokho.
Hulumende welive leSwatini uyachubeka nekusukumisa tikhwama letisita sive ekusukumiseni imisebenti lengenisa imali. Letikhwama tifaka ekhatsi sikhwama sekuthuthukisa abantu labasha, sikhwama sekuthuthukisa tinkhundla naletinye tikhwama letitfolakala emabhange akuleli. Etindzabeni teSwatini TV kubika Sithabile Mamba, Anasonto Mlangeni, kumakholokholo eMbabane.
Kutemidlalo indvuna yetemidlalo umhlonishwa Bonganzima ithile uhlelo lwashukumisa eSwatini libonakala ludlala indzima lenkhulu ekufundziseni sive ukuthi sishukume njengoba ke tindzaweni lalihambele khona lolu hlelo bantfu bayabonakala nekuchubeka kushukumisa imitimba.
Luhlelo lwashukuma eSwatini luhambela tonke tinkundla takuleli lapho khona sive sakuleyo nkundla sesishukumise siphindze sifunze kudlala temidlalo letahlukahlukene. Lolu hlelo kulomnyaka liqale enkundleni yaseMadlangampisi.
Sikubonile ukuthi kuletinye tindzawo lasifake khona shukuma sinase sitihambela sibabone abantu bangena emgwaqweni vele sibone ukuthi hayi leli vangeli liyangena abantu bayakubona bomqoka bekushukuma nase sibakhulumisile.
Lelunga lephalamende lakhona eMadlangampisi umhlonishwa Allen Vilane uthi lolu hlelo lwashukuma lufike ngesikhathi lesikahle kule nkundla.
Kube bokwati ukujima bena obesanga ukujima athi nyalo sesitawujima amawokele. So taba malula kakhulu lo msebenzi. Nalabantu sebabonile bebangathembi ukuthi minister oyedala na minister ukhona na kunashukuma ukhona nalaba setendlini sebatawutibona nabo ukuthi besisitendwa ngeyindeke na kunyalo kumnanzi nenkosi sibusisile besimo selitulo yasibona sinhle njani.
Sive sakhona eMadlangampisi sithi siyabonga ngekufika kwashukuma kule nkundla.
Nathi besilidzinga lokuthi sile sishukumise imitimba ngoba nasemakhaya vele asikhona lokuthi sishukumise le mitimba.
Ngajabula kakhulu ngishukumise umtimba abe flexible yonke ngendlela engifuna ngayo wendeke ngendlela nale nto awujabula ngayo nijabule nje konke nje.
Khona nje kube batfole ama exercises labaye bangathi kumcwa kangakanani kujima ke phala mhlawumbe babone ukuthi kumcwa kangakanani.
Tinhlanganiso temidlalo letifikile kutofundzisa ngekudlalwa kwato lemidlalo tingetulu kwale mfica. Lobikela umsakato eSwatini TV temidlalo ngilinda Dlamini anabonke Dlamini naphathizwe Msibi eMadlangampisi.
Mapulane wenhlangano yemidlalo wemabhayisikili kuleli ngixolisi shonga ukuthi tingodila babenato kubashovi bemabhayisikili eminyakeni lophelile kubisele emuva imitamo yale nhlangano ekuthuthukisa lo mdlalo.
Inhlangano engamela umdlalo wamabhayisikili kuleli ikhathatekile ngetingoti letendekile eminyakeni lophelile kubashovi bemabhayisikili emigwaqweni. Kule mpelasonto lenhlangano beyibamba umcimbi wokuxwayisa labo labasebenzisa wona umgwaqo lokufaka ekhatsi bashovi bemabhayisikili kanye nabashayeli betimoto.
Asibe nekubeketelelana emgwaqweni asiniketane intikhala emgwaqweni ezisisahamba. Ngiloko nje kakhulu esikuphakamisayo ukuthi sibonile eminyakeni lophelile ngabe iminyaka lomuhle siluze impilo emgwaqweni so sisukumeleka etulu kakhulu ukuthi asikwende kube
ngamahlandla lonyaka sizama ukushumayela leli vangeli lekuphepha emgaqweni.
Besincephetelo se-Motor Vehicle Accident Fund nabo bebayingxenye lomsebenzi bendlulisa umlayeto wabo. Bekumuzi Gule wakhona kasincephetelo ubeke kanjena.
Sesinakile ukuthi incumbi yabashayeli ababathathi njengebantu labafanele bawusebenzise umgwaqo. Sitobakhuthaza ke namuhla ukuthi basachubeka nalomkhankaso wabo abakwende kube ngumkhuba ukuthi nabo bakubeke embili tekuphepha. Mathathu ke magama lengwaphathiswe nguye noma ke CEO wesincephetelo uthi sonke isikhathi nabasemgwaqweni abende isiciniseko sokuthi emehlo abo ahlala njalo askena umgwaqo bayaskena bapredict bese bathatha the right decision ikakhulukazi kutawenda ukuthi nabo babe ngilabaphephile ngaso sonke.
Zembani Dlamini welitiko letakhiwo nekuthutha lobuke tekuphepha kuleli tiko nayo ubeke kanjena.
As you are traveling on the road, make sure that you are within the yellow line. Don't cross that line. At all times, please ride there, even if it's not a race. And please, whenever you are practicing on the road, practice safety. Make sure that you are not alone on the road. You are at the right place at the right time.
Umlayeto bohanjiswa ngiyo lenhlangano uthi bashova banikete umgamo long-1.5 wemamitha kusuka kumuca lomthubi khona emgwaqweni. Kanti labashova bamabhayisikili bebasuka ekhona plaza ezulwini bajika kamahhala babuyele khona ekhona plaza. Lobikela umsakatho eSwatini TV temidlalo ngilinda Dlamini anaphathizwe Msibi kaManzi.
Sitaphetha kanjalo ndzaba teSiswati sitawubahlola emarket sitabuya sikhulumisane ne-Youth Chamber of Commerce Industries.
Imbabane yenhlangano naPittsburgh tawucala ku-14 kuye ku-21 degrees Celsius. Manzini aqale ku-17 aye ku-24. Big Ben nalavumisa baqale ku-19 kuye ku-28 degrees Celsius. Simunye namhlume aqale ku-18 aye ku-27. Siteki naSikhuphe aqale ku-16 aye ku-23 degrees Celsius.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi.
Aba research bafunze.
Being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kulula.
Nathi kufuna sente ukukhiqida lokusembili.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Welcome back to the program. You're still watching Kusile Breakfast Show. This is the Monday edition. Did promise when the show started that we will connect with the president of the Youth Chamber of Commerce Industries in Eswatini, Kusile Sibanze. We want to talk about the developments that we are seeing happening around the engagements with the Citizens Economic Empowerment Act. Stakeholders will convene at the United Nations House this morning at 9 to sort of, look at how they continue to get sustainable outcomes, and it doesn't just end on ink, on black and white and in between talk shops, but rather gives us the results that we have as our aspirations. But beyond that, the MOU that we saw recently being signed by the Youth Chamber of Commerce Industries with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. What is really, the promise there to the youth? It seems it has a lot of promise to take the youth out of the doldrums, out of the margins, and really get them into a sustainable path. Kusile, good morning. Welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you on the show as usual. Kusile is joining us virtually, by the way. I should mention that. Let's talk about this deal maybe with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. It sounds very, very promising. What are the specific changes that young people or young business owners should expect to see out of this deal?
Very good morning, Sifiso, and thank you for having me on the show. So the MOU with the Ministry of Housing, first of all, is a very significant milestone for us as young people in the country. It just goes to show that the government actually can trust us now with important situations. Pardon me, Sifiso, can you hear me? Oh, okay. It shows that the government is able to trust us as young people in having such important agreements. So in that being said, now it is time for us to put our money where our mouth is and actually show that we can bring out the productive results that can be expected from young people with such energy, with such understanding of what data means and what it actually means for the entire country to have data-driven programs. So we'll be starting out in the municipalities where we have already started actually, and in fact we are currently preparing a report, our first report to send to the Ministry of Housing to say that we have been on the ground since we signed the MOU, and we are currently establishing the relationships within the municipalities through our chapter heads. This has been a program that has been going well so far, and so we are getting to a point where we'll be piloting with 10 young people from each wards, and from these wards then we'll be forming cooperatives that will be informing the program that we are starting with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development.
It also highlights, of course, the urban development as a sort of what you have coined as an opportunity hub, right? How can young entrepreneurs practically tap into these projects?
So it's quite easy because the youth chamber is everywhere. We have managed to stretch ourselves out, especially through social media, and now considering that Dingula have Wi-Fi, we have personal meetings with young people every Wednesday, not just for anything, but because on Wednesdays that particular 10 Emalangeni 1 gig data. So we're able to connect with quite a number of young people to let them know about local policies. For instance, we had a webinar on the SME policy. We just inform young people of recent policies that have been developed in government and on what the government is doing on a day-to-day basis in real time, and we do that every Wednesday.
Let's talk about, connecting with these national economic policies that you talk about, because we do see that it is a sort of, like a big focus that it does align rather with, Eswatini's broader citizens' economic empowerment, the efforts that are there really. And we are aware that this morning you will be in engagement with a lot of stakeholders within that particular framework. What are the outcomes that you hope to get there, and what is really that is on the agenda in terms of, what you want to discuss?
So for me, Sifiso, it's for the individual, because we're in a time as a nation where there's a lot of these policies that are converging now to set the economy straight. So with the stakeholder engagements, it is for the individual to understand what an empowered community looks like. Which programs empower our citizens economically? So that is the questions that we ask ourselves as stakeholders, because today there's going to be stakeholder engagements from different business associations that are going to be coming together. So they represent many industries and sectors. So it's important for us to understand what kind of a community is empowered. And then in understanding that, then we design the programs that are going to be data driven to inform our next moves, where everything that we're going to be doing from then is going to be very intentional, because this is a nationwide program, and we've been given a platform to actually go and speak on how we want to shape it, the different regulations that are going to be implemented. And so obviously it's quite exciting for me as a young person to be involved in this. And it's also a great time to be a young person in this country, because it means that our voices are being heard and our efforts are being channeled to doing the right things.
Yeah, and we know, government's role is quite critical there. We are seeing, obviously, the Ministry of Commerce being sort of, the drivers of this particular framework. But other key stakeholders like the Ministry of Finance, which is very, very, quite important in these discussions. The Ministry of Housing, as it were, you've already highlighted some of the, the works that the MOU that you have signed, and some of the other, aspirations that you have to continue to work. I'm wondering around the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Public Works. Are they forthcoming as well, with some of these ambitions that you have?
So with the Ministry of Finance, we were quite excited about the policy review, the policy review that they just recently had. So our submissions were made as a youth chamber, because it's important for us also in government procurements to actually have quotas as young people, because this actually gives us an advantage in that we understand that when we're capacitating businesses, this is who they're going to be supplying, because the government is the biggest customer in this country. So we are capacitating young people to understand what the procurement is and what it means to actually supply government, because the Minister Neil actually did mention that he doesn't we shouldn't be middlemen. We should be business people. So in the way that also informs the way that we supply the government as well, and we want young people to understand that.
It's a lot of organizations that are also key stakeholders in this drive. We can talk about SOEs like SETCO. We can talk about organizations like Business Eswatini, FESBIC, major business support organizations that are providing, the kind of backing that young entrepreneurs actually need. Are we seeing that sort of, inter-institutional collaboration in there?
So it always is brought together through an MOU. That's when you actually start informing the process of how we are collaborating as stakeholders. And we have an MOUs with quite a number of stakeholders. But I think the one that we are, because also us, we young people, we were also understanding the process of what it means to actually have a functional MOU and running with it. So I think with this current that we have, it's this current partnership that we have with the Ministry of Housing is the best way to demonstrate how an MOU can be functional and how a partnership can actually be functional. The ministry, the director of urban government is actually being very helpful in that she actually gave us a a document on the local government's public procurement policies. And because of that understanding that we have now of the role that private sector has in actually working through PPPs to empower communities and actually develop and create opportunities for people, stakeholders within the business region, within that community, it's brought quite a lot of opportunities for us and the young people that we work with.
We have seen, obviously, on social media, and my thing is always this, whenever I see photographs of meetings, I always wonder, where are we going to see, actionable action or practical action there? We have seen your meetings with Business Eswatini. We have seen that you also have a relationship with SEDCO. We know what FASBIC, boasts itself about in terms of, indigenous or rather local entrepreneurs, particularly the youth right now. Talk to me about that relationship that you have with Business Eswatini, with SEDCO, as well as FASBIC, or ones that you want to have with more FASBIC. I know that you have met with Business Eswatini, and Mr. Inathi Dlamini has also spoken quite, frankly about the work that the Youth Chamber of Commerce Industries wants to do, and that they have their support, their full support with regards to, achieving what it is that you want to achieve.
So maybe to start off with the relationship with SEDCO, it's very interesting because last year we were learning how to engage and network, and this year we're actually implementing. So with SEDCO this year, we're going to be working with them in capacitating the youth that are going to be pitching for the Entrepreneur of the Year awards. We were having a meeting with the CEO last week, and we actually have these updates regularly on our Wednesday webinars as well. So we're also going to be seeing how we can partner on the incubation hubs that they have in the country, and we also we'll be going with tagging with them to regional shows as we did last year as well. One of our entrepreneurs actually went with SEDCO to the Rand Easter show. So this year we want to do that as well. So that's what we were bringing back again. So those 3 items are the current standing relations with SEDCO, and with Businesses Eswatini, it's the mentorship part, because we understand that BE has seasoned entrepreneurs that can actually play quite an important role in building the youth that we have that are in business currently, because you find that if you have a mentor, you're able to actually build off the mistakes that the elder had already made. So now you won't be making the same mistakes. And in understanding the context of the historical context of business in Eswatini, mentors are quite valuable in that, and the Business Eswatini will play a vital role in supporting us in that. And there's quite a number of other programs that we'll be collaborating with them on as the year goes by.
Oh, fantastic. I want us to talk now. We have what? Around 7 minutes left. I want us to get into the real bottlenecks. And here we're talking issues around market access, as it were. Right. Funding is one thing that has been established, but the market access seems to be another story. What are some of the initiatives that are being done to link young business owners to corporate supply chains, as well as, export opportunities?
That's so I like market access because I was a student with ITC. I was learning trade map and market access map. So it actually helped me understand the context of market access from a higher level. So now we're able to bring it down to community level. And what we're doing as a youth chamber is we're actually going to be capacitating youth on the 2 different tools, ITC tools, trade map and market access. So there you understand the context of what it means to become a supplier, what are trade tariffs, what kind of regulations do you encounter when you're supplying to a certain community, because it can be in the context of a country, or it can be in the context of a region. Maybe Kusile is trading with Mbabane or Mbabane and Lubombo, like that. You can take it outside of the country. This now becomes Eswatini and South Africa. So understanding these 2 trade tools actually helps you put all of it into context, and that's exactly what we're going to be teaching the youth as we start our local economic development program as the Youth Chamber.
But we are awake to the, let's call it a painful reality that young entrepreneurs seem to be in agreement that they face quite a lot of, or they experience quite a lot of red tapes, when it comes to market access in particular. Is there a commitment from agencies like APA that you are seeing, or maybe from the company registrar, to streamline processes for youth-led businesses?
So the thing about pain, Sifiso, because you just talked, you said it's a pain point. The thing about pain is that it teaches you to inform your next move better. So we understood that there's a lot of bureaucratic challenges that come with actually running a business in this country. And it doesn't have to be so hard when you understand what the regulations are for. And this helps to inform the game of business that you are playing as a local business person, because business is very interesting. You should understand it as a game, but at the same time, it's a career, it's a brand that you wear. And in understanding that, you understand that the government is there for a reason, bureaucracy is there for a reason. So it's not so much that there's red tape, but it's just that the process to getting to you actually running the business becomes a bit informed by many loopholes along the way. So we want to reduce the time of registration of businesses, and we know that with the government in your hand program, that is exactly what is going to happen. So there's a lot of challenges that we've had as business people before that we see as the year is unfolding is going to be addressed by the way that the Ngwe government is working. So it's quite exciting actually to be a business person in this time.
Okay. Exciting that as it may be, another thing that has been quite, a thorn has been the inclusion of young people in conversations with regards to, formulating strategies. And right now, me and you have agreed that at 9 this morning, you will be part of a roundtable at the United Nations, headquarters there with industry leaders, luminaries, and of course, patrons of the industry with regards to the Citizens Economic Empowerment Act. And maybe I think this is coming at the right time, because we did see quite a lot of youth, and perhaps I think it's time we can, applaud what the communications regulatory body is doing in the Eswatini Communications Commission. We saw UNESCO students, we saw Limco Queen students, part of a conversation that involves developing them. They listened to some of their insights, some of their challenges, as well as appreciated some of their opportunities that are inherent there. I do want to understand that in the CEE, that is the Citizens Economic Empowerment, strategy formulations, are young people included with a clear commitment? When I'm talking about young people, I'm not just talking about you as a youth chamber. You are just the representative, but are there young business owners part of these conversations as well? Will they be part of that roundtable this morning?
So Sifiso, you need to understand that when a new thing is being done, it won't be easy creating the process in like that will eventually help everything run fluidly. So youth partnering with the government is a new thing. And I understand that there's a lot of challenges that are going to come underway because we still don't understand. Characteristically, we don't understand each other immediately. But if we see ourselves as people who want to learn from each other, that's government and the individual on the ground, or the youth representative on the ground. So at that point, when we come to conversations such as these that we'll be having this morning, where young people are going to be represented quite well, it is important for us to understand that we don't come from a pain point now. We don't speak from an emotional perspective, but we provide the solutions that we have been developing on the ground, because each and every day we are experiencing the challenges. So in experiencing these challenges, then we design the solutions. And today at the stakeholder engagement is a day for us to actually start unpacking the solutions that we have been developing on the ground.
Okay. But would you say that from a lot of these engagements that you've been having with government agencies, with government herself, that the conversations that you've been having will translate indeed into action. Are you getting that sort of confidence? I mean, this is the second year of the second term of the second year of this term.
So Sifi, so the government is in our hands, right? I like what the Ministry of ICT did, because they digitized what actually we should be embodying as citizens in the understanding of government. So government will set the policies, and then we will implement. So all of this, it's not that we'll just be sitting down and clapping hands for whoever we're expecting to start creating the process of us reaching the promised land, but it is us and actually standing up and daily doing the activities. Yeah, daily doing the activities. Yes, daily doing the activities that the policies actually inform, that make that the policies are making easier now. Because if we call ourselves business people, we have to have indicators of what do we say, of indicators of how we are business people. So that's by providing employment. The economy has to start changing. It has to start being evident in our communities that we now understand and we are informed as a young people, and we understand what the businesses that we have mean on the ground and what they mean to the next person in terms of education, in terms of service delivery, healthcare, understanding what a sustainable a community is, and actually bringing it to the ground.
Fantastic. Kusile, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure having you on the program. It is quite clear that the uphill battle that young entrepreneurs have been facing is looking to be a thing of the past. We're talking market access, funding opportunities, inclusion. I mean, all of these issues that have been quite thorny yesterday, it looks like tomorrow is taking us to the promised land with the Youth Chamber of Commerce Industries and, of course, government's commitment to include the youth in these processes. Let's go for a net break. We'll be back with our English news.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Welcome back. This is our international news. A massive fire tore through a nightclub in North Macedonia's eastern town of Kokani on March 16, and it killed 59 people and injured 155 of them. Authorities said that the blaze broke out around 2:30 a.m. local time during a concert by a local pop group at Club Pulse. Interior Minister Panj Toshkovsky told reporters. An official said 39 of the dead had so far been identified, adding that 18 of those injured were in critical condition.
This is the moment a party turns to tragedy as the ceiling in Pulse nightclub catches fire. What followed was panic, triggering chaos and a stampede at around 3 a.m. Clubgoers ran through the smoke trying to escape, but dozens were killed as the blaze ripped through the building. More than 100 people were taken to hospitals around the country, many with severe burns.
He was my only child and he died. What am I supposed to do? The officials should be hurt in the same way I am hurt. He was 21 years old. He only started to leave.
The authorities have already made arrests in relation to the incident.
We have already detained those related to the case. I want to assure the Macedonian people that this case will be resolved, with names and surnames.
The police have been collecting evidence from the charred building. The Interior Minister said they would investigate the venue's licensing and safety provisions. With a population of just under 2 million, it's the country's worst tragedy in recent memory.
At least 9 Palestinians, including 3 local journalists, were killed on March 15 in Israeli airstrike on Gaza's northern Bat Lahia town. The local health ministry said as Hamas leaders held a ceasefire talk with mediators in Cairo.
Minutes after 2 Israeli airstrikes hit Beit Lahia, relatives learned their loved ones were killed. Among the dead were 3 journalists. They were said to be filming humanitarian operations in the town in northern Gaza.
For 4 days we've been putting up tents for displaced people. Today more tents were delivered. They were filming when a missile was fired.
The Israeli army claimed they were legitimate targets to justify the massacre, which according to Gaza's Civil Defence Agency claimed at least 9 lives and wounded several others. The ceasefire, which came into effect on January 19th, has not prevented Israel from carrying out sporadic bombardments, but this was the deadliest so far. Since March, Israel has also blocked the entry of all aid into the enclave and has cut electricity to a water desalination plant, threatening drinking water supplies. Rights groups have labelled the moves as cruel and unlawful.
We're facing a worsening humanitarian crisis. The most vulnerable, women, children, the elderly and the sick, will suffer the most, deprived of even the most basic necessities. Severe hunger is imminent.
The new humanitarian blockade comes at a fragile moment in truce negotiations. Hamas said Friday it will release an Israeli-American hostage, Eden Alexander, and return the bodies of 4 others, only if Israel implements their side of the ceasefire agreement. Israel, for its part, confirmed it would continue indirect negotiations with the militant group, but on the basis of an American proposal which includes the release of 11 hostages and half of the deceased.
President Donald Trump said he ordered a series of airstrikes on the Houthi-held areas in Yemen on March 15, promising to use overwhelming lethal force until the Iran-backed rebels cease their attacks on shipping along a vital maritime corridor. Now, the Houthis said at least 31 people were killed, and Trump's national security advisor said on March 16 that the strikes had successfully targeted multiple Houthi leaders.
Sada in northern Yemen, one of the areas that was struck by the U.S. President Donald Trump ordered the strikes here, as well as in Yemen's capital Sana'a and in Rada, all areas controlled by the Houthis, who have gained control over much of Yemen since the beginning of their offensive in 2014. The U.S. strikes come after the Houthis resumed their attacks on ships, targets they say are all linked to Israel. Donald Trump ordered the Houthis to halt missile attacks in the Red Sea.
To all the Houthi terrorists, your time is up and your attacks must stop starting today. If they don't, hell will rain down upon you like nothing you have ever seen before.
The Houthis suspended their attacks when Israel and Hamas agreed to a ceasefire in January, but they resumed them to protest against Israel's blocking of humanitarian aid to the Palestinian territory. The militia said it will retaliate after Saturday's strikes. The Houthis are part of Iran's so-called axis of resistance. When Donald Trump called on Iran to control its proxies, this was to Iran's response.
We will respond to any threat if it becomes actual with a tough, decisive and devastating response.
Meanwhile, Moscow, which has grown close to Iran, said that Washington had informed it of its strikes on Yemen. It said it had called on all parties to end their attacks and start negotiating a political solution.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said on March 15 a so-called coalition of the willing group of Western nations would draw up plans to help secure Ukraine on the land, at sea and in the sky in the event of a peace deal with Russia.
They've been called the Coalition of the Willing, a group of countries led by the UK and France, stepping up efforts to ensure Ukraine and Europe's future security as a peace deal with Russia could be on the cards. The virtual summit was hosted by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and was organised in order to exert more pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin into accepting a 30-day ceasefire proposed by the US and backed by Kyiv.
We agreed we will keep increasing the pressure on Russia, keep the military aid flowing to Ukraine, and keep tightening restrictions on Russia's economy to weaken Putin's war machine and bring him to the table.
The meeting follows a dramatic rapprochement between Moscow and the Trump administration and comes as a gesture of support from Europe for Ukraine in the wake of the United States' foreign policy change. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly expressed his country's support for the proposed ceasefire, urging allies to put pressure on Russia.
I ask you to talk to America, to President Trump, to help bring peace faster. This can happen through full sanctions for ensuring that the aggressor gains nothing from this war.
The coalition have proposed a strategy aimed at increasing military aid to Ukraine, as well as boosting their own defence spending in order to ensure security on the continent, while also deploying European forces to Ukraine in the case of a ceasefire in order to deter future Russian attacks. Military leaders from around 30 countries will meet in London on Thursday as the coalition moves into the operational phase.
More than 50 universities are being investigated for alleged racial discrimination as part of President Donald Trump's campaign to end diversity, equity and inclusion programs that his officials say exclude white and Asian American students.
The tyranny of so-called diversity, equity and inclusion policies all across
the United States President Donald Trump is targeting DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion programs. The U.S. Education Secretary Lindsay McMahon on Friday announced as part of that more than 50 universities are being investigated for alleged racial discrimination. McMahon said students must be assessed according to merit and accomplishment, not prejudged by the color of their skin. In response, one university, Ohio State, said it does not discriminate on the basis of race, ethnicity, or any other class. The U.S. Department of Education says dozens of universities, including the Ivy League schools of Cornell and Yale, may have violated the 1964 Civil Rights Act by partnering with a non-profit organization that helps members of minority groups obtain PhDs. Also on Friday, a protest outside the DOE itself to demonstrate against a Trump move to cut nearly half of the department's employees.
Let me say to you, Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk, you will not take your wrecking ball to America's public schools. We will stand in your way.
That protest came amid a tumultuous week that included this demonstration in Trump Tower in New York on Thursday in support of a Columbia University student, Mahmoud Khalil, a leader of pro-Palestinian protests last year who faces deportation. The Trump administration is accusing Columbia of what it says is an inadequate response to alleged anti-Semitism on its campus, something the university denies. It's lost around $400 million in cancelled federal contracts and grants. The U.S. Justice Department is examining whether student protests at Columbia over the Gaza war violated federal terrorism laws. Another top university, meanwhile, Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, says it's been forced to lay off 2,000 workers due to Trump cuts. It said the termination of more than $800 million in U.S. aid funding is now forcing us to wind down critical work here in Baltimore and internationally.
The on-again, off-again tariffs between the United States and other countries are again under scrutiny, with the United States president not budging at all.
Tariffs and counter-tariffs with no end in sight.
No, I'm not going to bend at all.
As of right now, the U.S. places a tariff on metals imported from the European Union. The European Union puts a 50% tariff on U.S. whiskey. U.S. President Donald Trump threatens a 200% tariff on European wine, champagne, and spirits.
We've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore.
The U.S. imposes 25% tariffs on Canadian metals and an April tariff on lumber, dairy products, and cars. Canada levies, then withdraws tariffs on electricity exports, but keeps tariffs on $21 billion worth of American goods.
We don't need their cars. We don't need their energy. We don't need their lumber.
The U.S. puts a tariff on Mexican foods, but exempts certain items included under the North American Free Trade Pact, signed in President Trump's first term. A tariff on cars from Mexico is also rescinded. Mexico says it will respond on Sunday. And for China, 20% tariffs overall.
Now, there'll be a little disruption, but it won't be very long.
The unpredictability drives U.S. stocks wild. Analysts say if it continues, all governments lose.
They think that if they protect their economy, they're going to increase the productivity and the competitiveness of industries in their own market. And actually what they're doing is putting them at a disadvantage in terms of price and access to global markets.
The U.S. argues economic pain now will yield great results later. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
The tariffs, we've got strategic industries we've got to have. We want to protect the American worker, but a lot of these trade deals haven't been fair.
Tariffs are Donald Trump's favorite weapon, but are they stimulating growth or harming the economy? Now, the effects of his controversial decisions are already being felt by American business owners. Unemployment is rising, and financial markets are becoming increasingly volatile, raising the question, is the U.S. president playing with fire?
Faced with the spectre of an international trade war, the American economy is trembling. Tariffs, additional taxes, and contradictory announcements by Donald Trump has created instability for American businesses. In the state of Indiana, this company sells robotic components mainly made of aluminium, which is imported from Canada. With a 25% additional tariff, the components are likely to cost a lot more, and the owner does not yet know if he will be able to keep all of his staff.
Like right now we have 46 full-time people, about 10 part-time people. With higher costs might drive sales down, and that may make us not be able to hire more people in the future.
For others like these wine sellers who set their business up in Washington just under a year ago, the survival of their business is at stake.
This is around $50 with 200% tariffs. I mean, we could do the math. They're over $100 a bottle.
If he actually believes in the American dream, then he should understand that he's killing it. And he's doing it with an obsession over tariffs.
An opinion also shared by consumers whose confidence index has dropped by 10% in only a month.
I anticipate that we're going to have a recession, and it's going to be very difficult.
The uncertainty and the mood definitely concerns me.
The consequences can also be seen on financial markets, which strongly fluctuate with each of Trump's announcements.
Since Donald Trump has taken office, markets are increasingly sensitive and market volatility has increased. In the last few days, markets are in freefall due to Trump's repeated tariff announcements and possible recession.
Donald Trump could impose new tariffs in the next few weeks. According to him, they are the only way to boost the economy and to bring back production onto American soil.
Across country, violent tornadoes and high winds decimated homes, wiped out schools and toppled semi-tractor as a monster storm that also produced dust storms and icy conditions killed at least 33 people across the central and southern United States.
Oh, man! Oh, no, oh, no.
Reminiscent of a scene from an apocalypse movie, these images show a tornado ripping through a residential home in Mississippi. It was a similar story some 900 kilometers north in Missouri, as unrelenting rains and high winds battered the state overnight. In Texas, the high winds whipped up dust storms, strong enough to topple these huge trucks. Just 3 of several states affected by a monster storm that has torn through much of central and southern US, causing untold material damage, as well as claiming dozens of lives.
It's really disturbing for what happened to the people, the casualties last night, and I feel bad for their family and my dearest condolences to them, but it could have been a lot worse than what it was.
Over 250,000 homes and businesses across 7 states were without power by Saturday evening.
We've lost all of our food, all of the stuff that's in the freezers and refrigerators, everything in our cooler with the compressor going out.
It looks pretty extensive. The roof's blown off of it. Everything around it here is really bad. The trailer park up the street had fatalities. So, I mean, we don't have nothing compared to anything like that. I still have a home. They don't.
Elsewhere, the high winds triggered deadly wildfires. In Oklahoma, more than 130 fires were reported across the state, with some communities ordered to evacuate. All in all, the extreme weather conditions are forecast to affect an area home to more than 100 million people.
Tensions are rising between Turkey and Iran, with Ankara warning Tehran not to undermine efforts to end its war with the Kurdish rebel group, the PKK. Now, a peace deal with the Kurdish rebels would be a boost for Turkey in its race to gain influence in Syria.
The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, which controls a section of Syria, signed an agreement on March the 10th to merge part of its operations with Syria's transitional government. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan welcomed the deal, which went ahead despite what Ankara says are Iranian efforts to undermine it.
If we glorify our brotherhood as Arabs, Turks, and Kurds, we can disrupt the games being played on the region and secure our future.
Before the agreement, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan warned Tehran not to hinder efforts to reconcile the SDF with Damascus. Ankara says the SDF has links to the Kurdish rebel group, the PKK. The Damascus agreement is a key part of a process by the PKK's leader Abdullah Öcalan to end a decades-long fight with the Turkish state for greater Kurdish rights.
Ankara believes that Iran is trying to undermine this process both in Turkey, although Iran is unable to do that in Turkey, but especially in Syria. And Iran might try to convince them not to answer positively to Öcalan's call. This has been Turkey's main concern over the last few weeks.
Turkey and Iran are competing for regional influence, and Ankara accuses Tehran of using the PKK and others as proxies to frustrate Turkish forces' campaign against Kurdish fighters. Specifically, Turkey accuses Iran of assisting PKK operations in the Kandil Mountains.
Kandil Mountain is divided in 2 countries. The first one is Iraq and the other one is Iran, as you may know. And think that if there happens a military campaign like air attack to PKK cells across the Kandil Mountain, they go for a safe haven in Iran. They visit Iran and stay there for a while.
Tehran denies offering any support to the PKK. But the recent ouster of longtime Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad means Iran has lost a key ally, and Syria's new leaders are aligned with Ankara, not Tehran. A peace deal between Turkish forces and Kurdish rebels will further add to Iran's concern over Turkey's rising influence.
Turkey is about to end PKK through its policies, both domestically and regionally, and this creates kind of a panic. This is Iran's belief that it is going to limit Iran's influence in the region. It will empower Turkey in the region.
Turkey's foreign minister angered Tehran with a thinly veiled threat, saying Iran could face instability if it sought to destabilize Syria. A sign of Ankara's determination to resist any Iranian meddling as it seeks an end to its decades-long conflict with Kurdish rebels.
Well, the U.S. says China is the biggest threat to its national security, the pacing challenge that America's military must stay ahead of the terrain to remain the world's largest and most lethal fighting force.
The U.S. Navy, 296 ships strong. Thousands of companies build the parts and maintain them, including Fairbanks Morse Defense, the largest engine manufacturer in North and South America.
This engine has about 10,000 horsepower.
CEO George Whittier tells VOA 90% of the company's business goes to the U.S. Navy or Coast Guard. The company, he said, expected the size of the Navy fleet to increase to match Navy force structure goals that get bigger every year. But in recent years, the fleet decreased. Last year's budget funded just 6 new Navy ships, while decommissioning 15 from the fleet.
And then for the 2025 budget plan, originally that was supposed to be 10 new ships, and now they're only going to asking for 6 new ships again, and they want to decommission 19. So that's then down minus 13.
While the U.S. Navy is still considered the most powerful in the world when it comes to firepower and tonnage, the number of U.S. Navy ships is falling behind China's. Its Navy is on pace this year to surpass 400 ships, according to the Pentagon.
It's very frustrating and very challenging to be a supplier. They're rapidly growing the size of their Navy, and here we are on the sidelines. It's, we need to get more ships that are out there.
We send a shipbuilding plan to Congress every year.
Admiral Jim Kilby, the acting chief of naval operations, agrees.
And we've advocated for a bigger Navy for a long time.
But he says he hasn't had the budget to replace all his aging ships and submarines, much less grow the force.
And when we get a new ship, we'll replace an old ship because that old ship is more expensive and harder to maintain.
Whittier says the lack of growth isn't just slowing the maritime defense industry, it's sinking the supply chain.
There's thousands and thousands of suppliers that have gone out of business, and it's a real risk. I got a note from the folks at Electric Boat that make the submarines, and they'd identified something like 350 critical suppliers where they were concerned if they go out of business that they don't necessarily have a backup.
Fairbanks Morse Defense happens to be one of the biggest suppliers to U.S. submarines and the sole U.S. company supplying the biggest engines used in the military's amphibious warfare ships.
Without 4 of these, an amphib is nothing but a piece of metal floating in the water.
Each engine about the size of a small school bus.
We should have 2 engine suppliers, but the reality is if the Navy's only going to build 6 ships a year, it's a struggle to keep 1 engine supplier in business, let alone 2.
A problem so concerning, the president is taking action, announcing this month a new office in the White House devoted entirely to shipbuilding.
We used to make so many ships. We don't make them anymore very much, but we're going to make them very fast, very soon.
Congress is expected to increase the military's budget to surge resources for its shipbuilding shortfalls. While most ships made in the United States are for its military, Senator Mark Kelly tells VOA the state of U.S. commercial shipping is even more dire.
We went from 10,000 ships during World War II to 85 today. So in case of an emergency, in case of a conflict with a near-peer adversary, we're quite limited to getting all those supplies and equipment, troops across the ocean.
The United States builds about 5 commercial ships each year. China builds more than 1,000.
They have one shipyard, just one shipyard, that's bigger than all of our shipyards put together. They can construct them very, very quickly. And we just don't do that anymore.
Kelly in December introduced bipartisan legislation called the Ships for America Act. The bill aims to increase the U.S. commercial fleet by 250 ships in 10 years, which will also increase the supply chain for military ships.
A lot of the parts that go into a U.S. aircraft carrier, some of those same parts for those systems go in merchant ships.
Kelly says the bill uses tax incentives and fees on cargo coming into the country to fund the growth.
There are provisions in the legislation to have it fully paid for, so we don't have to add anything to the annual deficit.
Defense industry leaders say they welcome efforts to prioritize shipbuilding to help counter China, and warn inaction will put the U.S. even further behind in the future.
Well, U.S. officials tell the shortage of amphibious warfare ships has reached a breaking point. While the ships make up just 10% of the fleet, they are the go-to alternative to aircraft carriers when commanders need something more precise or expedient.
When commanders across the globe need more American military power, they often turn to Marine Expeditionary Units, or MEUs. Each unit is a team of about 2,000 Marines and sailors who deploy on amphibious warfare ships. It takes 3 amphibs, 2 small ones and one that looks like a mini aircraft carrier, to make an amphibious ready group, or ARG, which transports the Rapid Response Forces along with thousands more sailors. Once deployed, these Marines and sailors are the military's Swiss Army knife, providing everything from strike power to non-combatant evacuation operations to disaster relief.
Amphibs are vital to us. They're an existential part of who we are as Marines.
General Eric Smith, the top U.S. Marine, tells VOA the military needs 3 of these 3-ship units deployed abroad at all times. 1 unit from the East Coast, 1 from the West Coast, and 1 from Japan, a plan known as 3.0. Can you achieve that with the number of amphibs that you have today?
With the number of amphibs that we have ready today, no. I have the Marines and I have the squadrons and I have the battalions and the batteries to do it. I just don't have the amphibs.
The ship shortage saga, which has steadily worsened since the early 2000s, has divided the Marine Corps and the Navy. While America was busy fighting wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, its amphib fleet, plagued with maintenance deferments and delays, fell into disrepair, says Shelby Oakley with the Government Accountability Office.
You're running these ships to ground, not taking care of them. So this is kind of equivalent to just driving your car and never changing the oil and expecting it to last 15 years. It's just not going to be the case.
In a perfect ship cycle, the Commandant says he needs at least 27 amphibs to continuously deploy 3 of these 3-ship ARG MEUs. 9 amphibs deployed, while 9 are used for training and 9 are in maintenance. But 100% readiness is almost impossible, so the military says it should expect about 80% readiness, meaning about 7 of those ships would be ready to deploy and 7 would be ready for training. 4 extra ships are required to meet the Marines' needs, for a total of 31. The Navy currently has 32 amphibs, so why don't the Marines have enough of them?
Half of its amphibious ships are in poor material condition. Key systems aren't functioning the way they're supposed to.
Your readiness rate is down in the 50 percentile range and it needs to be 80%, then I would say that's a crisis.
One of the amphibs, the USS Tortuga, hasn't sailed in over a decade. And there are 15 more that the Government Accountability Office says are not on track to make it to the end of their 40-year service lives. Why are so many of these in bad shape?
We're trying to keep an aging force ready and focused on what it needs to do. It's not just amphibious ships, it's really the whole Navy. When I started in the Navy, we had almost 600 ships. Now we've got half that, but we're still doing the same mission.
Acting Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Jim Kilby tells VOA the Navy is trying to tackle the issues dragging down the amphib fleet the same way it fixed the issues grounding its fighter jets a few years ago.
In this chart, if it's green, I am. If it's red, I'm not. The Surface Committee has doubled the number of ships that completed maintenance on time. It's not where I want to be. I want to get better. It is not acceptable to have 50%. We want to get to 80%, and we owe it to the Marine Corps to do that.
Meantime, the Marine Corps says the consequences are stacking up.
The gaps in coverage really have already begun. There was a non-combatant evacuation operation required to get American citizens out of the Sudan when violence was erupting. And because there was no ARG-MEU presence, the AFRICOM commander was forced to use commercial airlines.
And even when units have deployed, they did not deploy as a full force. The USS America Amphibious Ready Group deployed with 2 ships instead of 3 last year because there wasn't another amphib available. And the USS Boxer Amphibious Ready Group had so many maintenance delays that the Navy had to stagger each ship's deployment last year, all months later than planned. What was supposed to be a 9-month deployment resulted in just 2 months with all 3 ships together.
When the Boxer wasn't there, they couldn't do F-35 operations. They couldn't support an international partner as they had planned.
Who is responsible for all of these things that happened last year?
The Navy is responsible, and we did not meet that in the case of the Boxer.
So will this happen again?
I hope it doesn't, Carla, but I can't guarantee that.
The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit completed its last patrol aboard the USS America Amphibious Ready Group this month. The next deployment of one of these 3-ship ARG-MUs from the East Coast or Japan is still months away, and officials say one likely won't deploy from the West Coast until 2026. A Navy official says the service only budgets deploying one 3-ship amphibious ready group for only 10 months in the year, because according to Kilby, the Marine Corps' 3.0 requirement is not a Navy requirement.
I do not have a plan to get to 3.0. I have a plan to maintain 31 ships per law in our shipbuilding plan.
That plan banks on the Navy keeping 6 of the amphibs in the fleet for several years beyond their expected 40-year service life, including some of those currently in poor condition.
But there's huge questions about whether or not they will even make it to their expected service life.
So how is that plan feasible?
So we have to plan the availabilities to go do the work necessary to get them to a life cycle health assessment above poor.
This is going to take at least a decade to fix.
Yep.
What happens if we find ourselves in a conflict with China and we start losing more ships?
We're going to have a problem. The whole point for having the ARG-MU out is to prevent conflict.
Kilby says the Navy wants the problem solved by 2027, the year China's leader Xi Jinping has ordered the military to be prepared to take Taiwan.
We have the Navy we have. That's the Navy we're going to have largely in 2027, and we just need to operate it more efficiently and effectively.
Experts say if Beijing attempts to take Taiwan, it could catapult the U.S. and China into war, while the amphib fleet is struggling to stay afloat.
That's it for our English news. That's our international news. Let's go for a net break. We'll be back shortly.
When commanders across the globe...
Mbabane enhlangano naPittsburgh taqala ku-14 kuye ku-21 degrees Celsius. Manzini aqale ku-17 aye ku-24. Big Ben nalavumisa baqale ku-19 kuye ku-28 degrees Celsius. Simunye naMhlume aqale ku-18 aye ku-27. Siteke naSikhuphe aqale ku-16 aye ku-23 degrees Celsius.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
The next pandemic is inevitable. While we don't know what disease or when, countries need to prepare. Strong vaccination programs are one way that countries can prepare to protect their populations. We've learned from the 2009 influenza and 2020 COVID-19 pandemics that having a strong seasonal influenza vaccination program prepares countries to respond. Countries with an existing seasonal influenza vaccination program achieved faster and more efficient pandemic vaccine introduction and reached higher coverage levels during past pandemics. WHO recommends that all countries should consider implementing seasonal influenza immunization to protect their population from annual epidemics and enable pandemic preparedness. Annual influenza vaccination programs make sure that countries have the experience and resources they need to quickly vaccinate during a pandemic. This includes experience developing national policies for adult vaccination, capacities for data and monitoring, trained staff, adaptable communications and other campaign materials, and experience reaching adult populations. Annual influenza vaccination keeps priority groups like health workers, pregnant women, older adults, and people with chronic conditions from becoming severely ill, thereby keeping people out of hospital. Annual influenza vaccination also reduces the number of seasonal influenza-related deaths, particularly among older adults and people with chronic conditions. Annual influenza vaccination programs help countries save money by reducing the number of hospitalizations and health workers' sick days. Seasonal influenza vaccines can be co-administered with other vaccines, such as the COVID-19 vaccine, during health visits. Procurement of seasonal influenza vaccines each year supports pandemic preparedness by maintaining global production capacity. This can increase the global supply of pandemic vaccines. WHO has resources to support countries in developing or expanding their influenza vaccination programs. To learn more, visit the WHO Seasonal Influenza Vaccination Toolkit. We all have a role to play in preparing for the next pandemic. What can you do?
Sinamukela ehlelweni sonibukela kusile breakfast show uhlelo lokuqala leviki lesithathu kunayinyanga yesithathu kulomnyaka losedulo. Sifuna kubuka temidlalo sibuya kumela sonto lebemnanzi kakhulu. Kodwa ke temidlalo sitawuqala ke Carabao Cup la khona sibone iLeicester City ihlula iLiverpool. Siyababona ke bantu enkundleni ekuxhumana bathi sebayamathi lo L lapha kuLiverpool ukuthi usho ukuthini. Umele nje ukuthi loss. Kanti ke sicubekela embili, we also saw some really interesting matches khona ku English Premier League. Arsenal ikhonile kuwina. Kanti ke the other game now that I discussed, United winning wasn't expected, but yeah, winning Manchester United. But Master ukhona studio tasichazela abantu ngosi kuvusela sikwamukele ehlelweni. What a weekend was.
What a weekend. Ngiyabonga ngimalo ukungimukela ehlelweni. Ngivusela umbukelo Swatini TV View. Ngiyabona lo sisojake na igame naye ngakuthi iLeicester City winile against Liverpool. Newcastle sibonile ku Carabao Cup. Labanengi bonga believe ukuthi Newcastle ingakwenda lokho. Igcine iyuncoba ke lo mdlalo ema-final labeka seWembley. Newcastle 2 Liverpool 1. But kulo mdlalo lo sibone cishe ngisho ukuthi iNewcastle because le belief icala kuma supporters siyibonile ngalesihlanu sisingalesihlanu ema fans bekavele awenda lama parades across London bawenda lama parades bendela ukuthi ba support team yabo le team yabo le abayingakawini ingomishi since the 70s. So ungacabanga ukuthi kukhulu kanganani ku Newcastle badlalile ke badlali abanjengabo Alan Shearer behluleka kuyiphakamisa ingomishi, but bakhonile bo Alexander Isak, bakhonile bo Bruno Guimaraes, bakhonile bo Joelinton kuphakamisa yona le ngomishi. I think idlalile iNewcastle jealous down idlalile lenhle kakhulu, but I concern ingala ku Liverpool because midweek baphume ku Champions League bashaya PSG nyalo baphuma ku Carabao Cup bayiphakamisa le quadruple bebayisho sekusele one I possibility I league lengicaba ukuthi nakhona mhlambe nangabe the football gods angekho ngakubo singabona kwendeka noma, but the congratulations Newcastle United kuwina yona iCarabao Cup, the first trophy in over ngati how many years, 50 something years. I think kakhulu sifisa ukuthi i-Newcastle United yathi nayilanza Eddie Howe labaningi bathi why Eddie Howe, because ngabalanza your well-known coaches like your Jose Mourinho. Remember ukuthi even Rafa Benitez wakwayi-coach but akakhonanga kuyiwina yona inkomishi. Labaningi bacabanga ukuthi mhlawumbe kutawulethwa big name, but kwangendeki lokho nama-players because nawubuka 1955 since 1955 bagcina kwina inkomishi.
That's 70 years.
Yeah, nama-players lakhona kule team akusi mhlambe yo Kylian Mbappe, yo Vinicius Junior, yo Yamil Yamal, yo Rafinha, kunabo Isaac uqhamuka ku-Real Sociedad, kunabo Bruno Guimaraes, umshayi. I think worth every pen labayishoko ku Newcastle ukuthi kumele bamkhulule ngayo lo over 100 million, I think,
and batamthenga
nami if bengincoach noma bengimanager we team eNgilandi bengingeke ngingabade ukuthenga yena Alexander Isak. In fact, he's a striker sifisa ngithanda ku conference lokho Phathizo angakuvuma since 2018. Amncane, he was young, he was way young, so long khala Alexander Isak
asakhombisa nje potential,
but
you could see ukuthi this young man is promising. But master, what is wrong lapha ka Liverpool? I mean siyasho lokuthi sebadliwe kabili. Yes, I mean personally mina ngithi English Premier League ngeke badliwe. Okay, ngeke, but they can lose some games, but they will win the trophy. But I think going into the next season, because the momentum labana bebangafuna loku maintain, I mean, doing what City has done over the years, just to carry that momentum for a couple of more seasons. Yini le problem, they need to fix that right now.
Okay, lo kwendekile ku Liverpool. Ngakusho loku nakusaqala yona isizini. Kuthi iLiverpool ngendeka ibe netinkinga. Unfortunately, la league bayenda le run lenhle kwakhanzakala ukuthi lamanye ama teams abanema injuries inqumbo, kwakhanzakala ukuthi Manchester City ayikho kahle, kwakhanzakala ukuthi Chelsea isakha, kwakhanzakala ukuthi.
So are you saying Liverpool is not just at the top because they are a really good team, but there's an element of luck lebekhona ukuthi lamanye ama teams abe inconsistent?
Exactly. And ukubona lokho ku Champions League bathi tena bakwenda because bebadlala Sifiso ngeke sikubalekele lokho, but kungasayini ama-players lamanengi bachubeke nama-players ala season because udlala i-league, udlale i-FA Cup, udlale i-Carabao Cup, udlale i-Champions League, 4 tournaments with the same squad. Yes, they have a squad, but I think la Midfield because Salah nje udlalile lesithathu, udlalile itolo 90 minutes. Lo mdlali loyo udlala week in week out ku-league. Akatholi shot target against PSG the other day, even nakule first leg. Uyabona lo si if mhlawumbe bebakhona lokurotate kahle le squad bebatawukhona ukuthi mhlawumbe lokungenani bawine i-double or maybe i-triple, but akendeki lokho. Le league batayiwina because bayiqale kahle, kwakhanzakala ukuthi lalamanye ama-teams abanale ma-ups and downs, lalamanye asakha, lalamanye kusenteka tonke letinvo leto. But I think if onke lama teams bekakahle njengabo in terms of injuries, I think bebangeke bayiwine league.
Ngabe le story sihlukile nyalo, but Liverpool only has a shot on 1 trophy now. I mean it's sad nalokuthi nje kwenteka in a space of 2 weeks. Lokuthi kubese kuyacaca lokuthi nini sekufuna salon focus on this particular, hardware. But I do want us to talk about the English Premier League. An important win for Arsenal, beating Chelsea. Obviously a morale booster for the team going into the next season. I think for Labour team lawas as well going into the next season.
I think esifisa nawubuka lama results, Arsenal winile against Chelsea 1-0 beyisekhaya i-Arsenal. I think vele kulo past 4-5 years i-Arsenal cishe siyadominate ku Chelsea. But njoba usho ukuthi moral booster kuyo i-Arsenal ukuthi ingawina, I think basementa yona iposition yabo number 2 because i-Nottingham Forest Saturday beyiwinile against Ipswich 4-2, lebese kwenda ukuthi umgamo kube about 3 points, but yakhona ke kuwina i-Arsenal. Fulham ishaya Spurs, I think excuse me, Spurs nabo on and off, on and off, on and off, but Fulham I think akusiyo i-team longayithathela pass because basekhona even na FA Cup nakuleague cishe badlala kahle kunabadlali lapho Raul Jimenez lengicabanga ukuthi a good player kunabo Iwobi all those players, so I think badlalile. Manchester United winile 3-0 against struggling Leicester City lengicabanga ukuthi for Ruud van Nistelrooy iyamehlula i-Leicester City bekunelithemba ukuthi mhlambe nabangamnika i-Manchester United nakabambile, but senginema-doubts inyalo because le ndlela ladliwa ngayo ayijabulisani. Everton idrawile ekhaya ne-West Ham on Saturday 1-1. I think nakhona lapho ngicabanga ukuthi i-West Ham ngiyo lebeyidlala ngcono yayidominate le game leyo. Manchester City against Brighton igame leyo lebeyisakatwa la Eswatini TV. I think nakhona la i-Brighton bekumele ukuthi iwine lokungenani 4-2 nawubuka lama chances labawageja, but yagcina idrawile 2-2. Then Southampton tinva atihambi kahle ikhale phasi ku-Wolves nga 2-1. I think for i-Wolves iboostekile kule win le because iyayinika ama-point labalekela yona that relegation zone. Then Brentford Bournemouth, I think le game lena sifetho bengivele ngathi lokuthi itaba nama-goal because i-Bournemouth siyibonile isokolisa ema-teams lamakhulu ishaya emagoli. Brentford I think ngilenye ema-teams la shaya emagoli this season lanemagoli lamanyenti kakhulu, so I think le game lena mina bengigadzile lamagoli. Mbemu again athola leyo assist kukhona utaba facana nesihlangu on Wednesday if atawuthola enough rest ukuthi aphumule bamende that recovery session, but nje overall I think i-weekend yayo iphele kude igame lebebete ligoli. I think logo ngicabanga ukuthi thina manje nangabe kungadlala i-team yakho uyabona ukuthi hayi icishe kuhamba kahle.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy lokhu sithinzile kancane zabe esihlangu sitasibukela very very soon, but naso sesine major blow. We have seen the headlines. Junior I think ibuhlungu kakhulu. Even the head coach Strafco is lamenting over Lendzaba lena. Is it that much of a blow? Do we not have capable players lapha nje lesingasho ukuthi they can be, you know, equally good replacements? It's just one player.
No, wadi emgoni nawukhuluma nge-master player the likes of your Lionel Messi, your Cristiano Ronaldo, your Kylian Mbappe, your Neymar Jr., your Vinicius Jr. Labadlali labo akusiko nje kumreplace lo mdlali, iba khona lesikhala nawubuka le performance yakhe ku league, nawubuka le performance yakhe kungwenyama cup. But having said that, angati ukuthi coach beka professor yini nakalanza Pupu ukuthi abe part of the national team, because Pupu can be that number 10 if asefomini a match na Junior. Yes,
and I think he will want to prove a point, Banele, because you know his career over the past couple of seasons has been shaky. Yet good loke wadawutha talent alabanele Pupu's Konze master. Do you see him really being in form? Is this enough time for him? Would see kwaqala nje bakhele chemistry as the squad lesibitwe nguye Strafco. Is it enough time for him to become that Pupu that we know?
I think inhlanhla yakhona sifisa ukuthi nawubuka labadlali lababitiwe cishe Pupu udlalile nabo, cishe uyabati ufamiliar nabo, labanye udlalile nabo kubabana solos like bo kwakhe bo Tiger, labanye wadlala nabo kumbabane Highlanders, even na national team. Yes, it's been a while agcina kubitwa ku national team, but nalokuthi uyadlala eTanzania. Udlala uyiregular, so I think angeke kuze kumthatha isikhathi ku-adapta. Nalokho ukuthi-ke sifisa nangibuka mina le campaign the crop of players labitiwe cishe badlali labangathi nawungathi uyaphuma uyathambela edolobheni ubakhanze bandzawonye bayevana. So ngicabanga ukuthi lokho kumcwa kakhulu for us silive ukuthi ube nebadlali ecampini laba united, more especially the guys from Lutze. I think kuna Tabolanga, captain number 1 Highlanders, kuna kwakhe, kuna Tiger. I think banyindana ba about 4 or 5. So uyabona ukuthi hayi khona kukhona lokuvana lokukhona lapha ku-national team.
Which game lana lekufuna sibuke ngathi we want to make the best of? I mean, we have Cameroon, we have Mauritius. Surely kulama team lawa icon game lekufuna siye ukuthi lana this should be a win for us.
Against Cameroon asforce a draw.
Okay.
Force a draw against Cameroon because among two lama games ma home games. Sorry, lama games ma home games. Mauritius agameli no si debate. Ukuthi iMauritius kumele noma sidayishaya agameli. If coach ahluleka kuyishaya iMauritius kumele angabuye embombela. If ahluleka no kumele vele abhalele incwadi asathi ke ngoba sigcine asethe contract lebhale phasi yes avele agibele indiza ahamba eCroatia because utabe sewehlulekile ku match ku Chan against Madagascar last game sehluleka AFCON qualifier sehluleka World Cup qualifier sohlula kudla iMauritius. I think njengoba ngisho ukuthi if ahluleka kudla iMauritius on Sunday then kumele ukuthi bambhalele incwadi avele asala gibela ayejoza gibele OR ahamba eCroatia.
I mean, Sayiteki Nzaba Junior is going to miss both games. Asesikhulume nga Junior ekubuyeni kwakhe ke lapha ekhaya nje kudlala kwakhe ukuthi le injury le mani ibuka ngemehlweni nesenibabona kakhulu badlali balimala kanje. Kubukeka ukuthi le injury report yakhe it's out for how long?
Okay, isi mhlambe the official report yes le injury bekavele anayo.
Okay.
Yes, bekavele anayo lincane sekuthi bekazama lokuthi adincenge. Unfortunately uthi tena akafika ku national team yaphindze yatsinzeka yavela but Junior being Junior mina ngike ngambona over the years abanama injuries. I think batawuzama lokuthi more especially for yona irwele but tawutama ngalokhu konke lokusemandleni ukuthi abe khona because bayamdzinga for Ingwenya Cup final against Imonen Pirates former team
which we don't know the date yet.
Singalati lona langa la Ingwenya Cup but I think batawufisa ukuthi lokungenani the next week abasakhonile recover ukuthi lokungenani na imemeta nayiphuma le date kube vele sekuvele a trainile.
Anyway, yeah, those are the top stories this morning with Demidlalo. Of course, Newcastle winning that trophy, that Carabao Cup final after 70 years. United finally getting a win, but in fact, Master didn't even talk too much about it. Now we move.
By the way, sorry, just in a minute. Ingwenya Cup bomage. Gune Young Buffaloes gune singizini laba udlala ama finals. The first ever Ingwenya Cup bomage. In singizini ishaya i-Royal Leopard convincingly. Young Buffaloes yashaya i-Green Mamba 2-1. So I think sitawubukela ema-final the best lengike ngawabona in over ngasho 6 years ka women i-final. So fireworks.
Only thing I'm praying for is that the time slot kube sikhathi lesi alawa sonke ukuthi sikhone kubukela kungabe ukuthi into le uqalwa ngayo ekseni okwa but I don't think so. We have seen how the proceedings of Ingwenya Cup.
Yeah, ngicabanga nje ukuthi if mhlambe ibaniko leso sikhathi 12 then tawbana enough time ukuthi by 2 iphelile leyo game leyo then maybe half 3 or 4 kuqala that
main event.
Yeah.
Main event. We are not scared to say it's the main event. It is the main event. Linda Masadlamini zathele emsakato lapha ekhaya bestekade imidlalo bongosa sibahlelo etmarket sitawubuya sivalele ihlelo masinya.
Kude lesinye isikhathi ngaphandle kwalesi
aba research bafunze being risky means ukuthi nalokuwa kwayo kumula
nathi kufuna senze ukukhiqiza ngokusebenzisa
Asifike emaphethelweni luhlelo lwethu lomuhla sethembe liviki litaba ngiloluhle. Kanjalo lelisuku lwalamhla sisaqala lona leviki. Lelisuku oluhle nisale kahle.